So today we're going to talk about using pastels to add a little bit of detail to your model horse artwork, mainly through shading. It doesn't matter if your model has been painted in acrylic or in oils. This technique will work for however the model was finished. The only thing that you want to make sure of is that the model has been sealed with some form of sealer, preferably Testor's dullcote. That way the pastel work that you do to it will not stick or possibly ruin some of the other colors. If the pastel is wet, which can happen, and you have an acrylic, you can end up diluting the color that's already on the model. So you don't want to do that. You don't want to do more work than you actually have to. But to start off, one of the horses that I'm going to use today, this is actually a commission piece. This is Scarlet. This is done by Stacey Tumlinson. This is the mini gypsy version with the blowing mane and tail. What I love about this model is the gorgeous hair and the movement of it. And you can really accent the low and high areas in a model like this with using pastels as far as shading. So let's talk about pastels and what you need to look for when getting one. For pastels, it's important to make sure that you get a quality product. Pastels are priced based on pigment. I'm sure you probably heard this before, but less expensive pastels are a little bit more chalky. You usually don't get the same surface area coverage with it. But let me show you the difference. This is an inexpensive pastel that is manufactured by Generals in the United States. Okay, and this is Faber-Castell. This also, I believe, manufactured in the U.S. And let me just show you the difference on the two pastels. Now, when you use for model horses, in general, you are going to break up your pastels. You can use it with a razor or with scissors or whatever you prefer and make pastel dust with it to apply. But the experiment that I'm going to show you right now actually shows the difference between the two. And that affects how well the pigment is shown on the model. So let me just show that to you right now. The first thing I'm going to do is, this is the more expensive one. I'm going to do a straight line. And this is the Generals. Do another line. Now I did the equal amount of pressure on both. And I just want to show you, while they're two different colors, they're about the closest I could get together. This is the Faber and this is the Generals. You'll notice, obviously the line is thicker. This is a much softer pastel, which means that it's going to be easier to break up. Also, you'll notice there's full contact pretty much the entire length when I applied it to the paper. The Generals, you can see it's pretty forcible, especially right here. You can notice that it's quite a bit darker than the end, which is normal when you write. But notice the breakup in between the lines here. This is a much harder pastel, and there's less pigment in it. The reason why you don't want to purchase pastels that are particularly like this when it comes to doing model horse art is that in some cases they don't even show up. You can do a lot of work and you can't even see it later. So it's important to make sure that you invest in pastels that have a lot of pigment in them. So this is some area that you really don't want to skimp on or try and bargain with. You want to really get a good quality set of pastels. Okay, so now I'm going to show you how to add them to the model and get that together. Okay, so we've now taken our pastel sticks and we have shaved them down so we have a bit of pastel dust, and that's there that you should be able to see. For pastel application, I prefer chisel brushes, and as you can see, these have been very well used. There's hardly really any brush there, but it's perfect because basically when you apply pastels to a model, you're pretty much kind of grounding that pigment into the model, and then you seal it with sealer, which keeps it adhered to the model. The great thing about pastels is you can layer them. And if you don't want to invest in an airbrush, or if you have an airbrush but you don't feel comfortable using it for tiny detail work, pastels are an excellent choice just because they can give you an airbrush look without actually having an airbrush. Okay, so the first thing I want to show you how to do is to add detail in the mane and in the tail with pastels. And so I'm going to show you on this model. This particular model is a commission piece, and the owner wanted a very nice Sabino chestnut, kind of an interesting color. And on this one I didn't go really nutty with the tones in the mane, but you'll notice if you look closely that there's a lot of color there, variation. So it's not just a flat color, but to make those variations pop, what you can do is go in with shading and your darker pastel, which is, as you can see, this is a pretty dark, like burnt umber, and add that into the lower areas. And what it ends up doing is giving you a much darker look. I like to go underneath the hair where a shadow would naturally be, especially near the face. And the reason why I concentrate so much on the face is if you show model horses a lot and you've watched judges, they're no different than you or I when we look at a model. The most important feature is always the face, hands down. If you do not have a realistic looking face, if you do not have one with the correct coloring, all of that's going to score against you. And plus, if the horse doesn't have a pretty face, the judge might not come back and look at it again. So the face is where you really want to concentrate your details on, especially if you're trying to have a horse that does well at live shows. So again, I'm just going underneath the hair where I think a shadow would be, and I'm adding it right there. And you can just blow off any areas that if you get a little too much on. And I'm going to follow this on the side just because it gives a nice break in the face. And hopefully you can see that now. We've got a lovely shadow as it comes down from the eye across the face that we didn't have before. So again, this is a nice way to add depth. And you want to go pretty much, if you're not sure where the shadows would be, you can take like a flashlight and hold the flashlight directly above the horse. In fact, let me do that right now. Notice the light above. Everywhere that you can't see light touching, that's an area that needs shading. Okay? Right now, I wouldn't concentrate on the body. Really, the hair is what we're concentrating on today. I will do body shading in a different video. Okay, so we have added the pasteling where we wanted to as far as the shadowing. Something I wanted to talk about real quickly was why I chose these particular size brushes, the very short stubble ones. As I mentioned earlier, so you can press the pigment into the crevices, which are pretty small here. The longer your brush is, the less dramatic you can make the change. For example, this is a longer chisel brush. You can see a lot more hair, let's call it hair on that. The longer it is, the less force you can use when you apply it to the model. This is great for blending if you want a very, very subtle change. This is very good for body shading because you don't want to have a very strong mark in a lot of your body shading. But for work in the mane and tail, which is what we're working on today, usually these are going to be your best bet, and you may end up buying brushes like these and cutting them down yourself, which is what I end up doing. And anyway, I do use these sometimes in the mane if I want to blend out a certain part, but again, these are mainly for body shading. Okay, so the next thing, if you have applied your pastels to the model and you're happy with how it looks, you're going to want to seal it. The product that I recommend is Testor's dullcote. The dullcote gives it a nice matte finish. It will seal your pastels to the model. This is very important. If you do not seal the model, and you pick it up or you touch it, you're going to actually remove the pastels from the model. This means it's going to be stuck to your fingers, and anything else you touch, you're probably going to continue to spot that around. So it's important that you seal the model. It's also very important that you adhere to the directions on the can. Hold it 12 inches away, spray in light mitts, give it time to dry. High humid conditions are not a good time to spray or seal your model. But it's important that you give several coats of Testors and pretty much in every nook and cranny you can possibly get it in. And then your model will be nice and sealed, and you have less of a chance of pulling